Do you hate line twist on a spinning reel? I think everybody does. But there's a few steps that you can take and pretty much virtually eliminate any line twist on a spinning reel. Spinning reel, AKA egg beater, whatever you want to call it. These things have been around forever. Obviously, if you have a really cheap spinning reel, you're not going to get a nice roller on here. So, you know, get the best spinning reel that you can. This is a Daiwa Tatula LT 3000 right here. I fish those in the Daiwa Ballistic, but you know, if whatever nice type of spinning reel will help and be a lot easier to manage. Just set that down, but that's really not one of the tips. You can take a very affordable, inexpensive spinning reel and have very few problems with three simple tips. Three simple tips. I'm gonna walk you through each one of them, try to explain each one of them, and I'm gonna start with how you fish it. That's number one. That's how you fish it. And so I'm gonna take my little cover off my casting rod here. I've just got a little worm I was fishing, you know, basically floating worm style, which it doesn't have a lot of weight, and that's perfect for that. But how you fish it is key. So, you know, you're gonna throw your bait out there. Once you throw your bait out there, you're gonna have a lot of slack in your line. You gotta be careful when you have that slack in your line's got that bow in it, it's going all the way down to the bottom. Don't just start reeling. One, you want to flip the bail manually, and then you want to lift up until you have some tension on your line right here. You want to have a little bit of tension on there before you start reeling that right there, and that's what I call, you don't want to reel on slack. That's tip number one. Do not reel the line when it is slack. Now, what really brought this to my attention is one of those things that I've done because I fished spinning rods for so many years. It was one of the things I did, and I didn't even think about it until my stepson was little. He's older now. He's very proficient at most every kind of casting, but he was young. He was a little young buck. He's probably 8 or 9 years old, and I would take one of the spinning reels that I had just come back from a tournament, and I had fished, you know, say a shaky head or drop shot or something, and I would take that rod. I'd fished it, you know, for a full day or 2 or 3, not a single line twist. And we would go down to the river here. He would make 2 casts, and then he'd turn around and go, "Hey," and he'd hand me the reel, and it'd have big bird's nest, man. It would be a big bird's nest. And I said, how in the world was he doing this by just 2 casts? And then I realized he was throwing the bait out there, just like that, just throwing it out there, and then it would hit the water, and then the line was completely slack, and then he would just start reeling. And I realized that when you reel on that slack line, it twists your line unbelievably. Now, the braided line, you just back up a step. Braided line does not twist near as bad as monofilament or fluorocarbon. I'll get to that in a minute. So I was fishing straight fluorocarbon at the time, and once he got the knack of figuring that out, I don't think he's dealt with line twist ever since. That was a big deal. So do not reel on slack line, tip number 1. Tip number 2 is the type of line you put on the reel that you have. If you have a 2500 or 3000 size spinning reel, that's what this is. This is a 3000 size. The 2500 has, and it doesn't matter, it's kind of across whatever brands. The spool's just slightly smaller. I like the little bit larger spools because the line handles a little bit better, no matter if I'm fishing with braided line or if I've got fluorocarbon on there, no matter which line I've got. The big deal is the type of line you put on there. You do not want to put too big a line on your spinning reel. This is 12-pound braid. I fish pretty much 12-pound braid exclusively for all of my bass fishing tackle. 12-pound braid, and then I'll have it to a fluorocarbon leader of 15 to 20 feet, somewhere in that range. Maybe a little over 20 on some of the rigs, just depending on what it is. If you want to see how I attach that, there is a YouTube video that I have done called the FG knot. I didn't invent the knot. It is a really hard knot to tie. I did a whole video on it. You can see that there. But we're not talking about leaders. We're just talking about how to reduce the line twist. If you put braided line on there, you will have much less line twist, period. I highly suggest learning that FG knot. And if you can't learn that FG knot, there's some other knots that are okay, but the FG knot, I'm telling you, way better than anything else out there. And what you can do is you can get, like this is Sunline X Plasma 12-pound lime green. It is what I fish with. It is amazing line. It will last you. You put it on your spool. If you fish a lot, it'll last you a year. If you fish here and there, it'll last you a couple years. All you got to do is replace your leader when you once after you've been fishing a while and you wear it down, or your leader gets shorter. You just tie on a new leader, and the line will do great. That's one thing I recommend. But if you're not worried about leaders, all that kind of stuff, you want to put monofilament on there, or you want to put straight fluorocarbon on there, I would highly suggest not putting any bigger than 8-pound test on a 25 or a 3,000 size spool. If you put 10 or 12-pound test on there, your casting distance is going to be drastically reduced, your line twists are going to increase, and you're just not going to have very good experience fishing. It's not going to be fun. It is just not going to be fun. So 8-pound, kind of the limit. Every diameter is a little, different. Everybody's 8-pound line is not exactly the same size. But if you're going to put fluorocarbon on, I highly suggest, Sunline FC Sniper. FC Sniper is great line, handles really well. That's what I use for all my leaders on my spinning reels. So just make sure you have a good quality line on your leader if that's the way you're going. If not, make sure your line is supple. If you're going to reel it directly on, whether it's monofilament or it's going to be fluorocarbon, you want to make sure that the line is supple so it handles well on that spinning reel. Make sure you have the right line. That's step 2. Step 3, it's a big one, and it is how you put the line on. Now, a lot of people have said things like, you got to put the spool up, spool up or spool down, or this or that or the other. There's a way that I do it. Now I'll tell you the way that a lot of people are talking about, the way it's supposed to come off the spool. I'm going to show you that, but I'm going to show you the way I do it, and I have very few problems. Even if I'm directly putting on the fluorocarbon, very few problems the way I do it. I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, this is not the Ice Bucket Challenge. This is an El Cheapo ice bucket. You can use a Tupperware container, any kind of plastic container is just fine. But what you want to do is you want to have your line inside, so it's got some resistance on each side. You can put other spools, you can figure out other things to put in there to kind of give a little resistance. So when the line's going to come off the spool, you're going to have a little bit of resistance on there. That's key. But when you're going to be coming off the spool, I'll show you here in a second, you're going to have the line coming off the top of the spool. I'm going to reel it on just like a bait caster, But if you want to be old school about it and you want to set the spool down and reel it off of the spool, you want to make sure that the line comes off counterclockwise, because your line is going to go onto the reel in a clockwise manner. So you want that line to come off counterclockwise, no matter what the label is, because I've seen it. These things, when they come out of the factory, they're just plopping off the other brands. They're plopping off, and they're just picking them up and sticking the sticker on one side or the other. Now the Sunline spools are a little different. The sticker goes on one side. Some of the other brands, they're just sticking them on there. So you can't make a blanket statement on it needs to be label up or label down, because that'll just get people confused, because there's so many different ways that manufacturers do it. So this, I'm telling you, this is the way to do it. I'm going to show you that. This is the Sunline X Plasma. That's what I'm going to have on this one. Probably need to go ahead and look at replacing my line. I'm going to get another spool, and I'm going to put it on. I'll show you how this is going to look here. I'm going to open it up. You can see how bright that is. You can see it. It's very visible, very easy to see. And it's going to come off the spool very easy. But I'll get that all rigged up, and I'll show you that. Okay, so that's how I put the line on, no matter if it's braid or fluorocarbon or monofilament, whatever it might be. I put it on the same way. You definitely want to have a line conditioner. The KVD line conditioner is really good. That's the one I like. And you want to put that on. You can put that on as you're putting your line on, or you can put it on right after you put the line on the spool. Like this is straight fluorocarbon on here. Right after you put it on, you can spray it down, let that line conditioner dry, and then you'll have even less line twist as well. But I'm gonna give you one last tip. Let's say you followed all of these things and you still have got a bunch of line twist. Maybe you have a lure that just happens to be twisting your line or something like that. Here's what you do. You're gonna take your bait and cut it off. Cut your bait off. Get out of here, bait. Got a little Neko rig on there. Cutting that off. So you got a bunch of line twists on here. You're gonna take and pull off. If you do it on the water, it's great to do, but you're just gonna pull off probably 50, 60 yards of line. Pull it all off with no lure on there. And let that line go. Let it be free. And then when you spool it back up, grab your line up above the reel, and you're gonna make sure it's nice and tight. If you want to get fancy, you can put a little cloth, a wet cloth or something right there to have your line come through that. You can do that as well if you want to get real fancy, but you don't have to do that. But you pull like 30, 40, 50 yards of line off, and whatever you're casting, then reel it back onto your reel with pressure. Put that pressure there, because there's no lure on there. Just reel it back on there, and you're gonna have all that line twist is gonna untwist itself while it's out there. And if you're on the water, you can let that line drag way behind the boat and then reel it up while it's wet. It does even better. So that's the last tip. If you do get some line twist, cut your lure off, pull the line off, let it untwist, and then reel it back on with no bait on there, and the line will untwist itself as you go to reel it on there. So do those tips that I just told you, and you will eliminate line twist from your spinning reels, aka the egg beaters. You're gonna eliminate all that, and you have a much more pleasurable fishing experience.